Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to another episode of EOTT. And this evening, we're lucky to have joining us is Jon Wedger. How are you, John, brother?
Yeah, hello, mate. Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to come and see us, John. I know you were in Switzerland yesterday. What were you doing over there?
I was being interviewed by a TV channel called Free Spirit TV, and they were lovely, lovely people, really good people. So I only went for the day, flew out there, did the interview, and then flew back. Very expensive country, but the people themselves were really great, and I really enjoyed it. And they were just so hospitable, and they totally looked after me. And we did a 2-hour interview, and it went down really well.
Oh, awesome. So a lot of you will be familiar with John. You will have seen John's stuff. For those of you who aren't familiar with John, John's obviously been over in Switzerland doing an interview, exposing a whistleblower and his information from his journey as, was it 27 years, John, as Scotland Yard?
Yeah, I got 27 and a half years pensionable service, yeah.
Yes. So I discovered John in 2017. He did an hour's talk with Brian Gerrish on the UK column, which you can check out. And then more recently, he has done a nearly 3-hour talk with Shaun Attwood, which I highly recommend you go and check out. John gets right into it, and it's quite an extensive story, John. What I wanted to get into with yourself is like, we've been on the ground. Are you familiar with Carroll Woods, John? Her story?
No.
No, Carroll Woods is, she's currently now in Lancaster, incarcerated under the Mental Health Act, sectioned off.
Right.
She was like, she was doing social services whistleblowing.
Okay.
Yeah, she blew the lid off quite a lot of stuff. It's been an ongoing process, and she's been right up against this. It's been quite revelatory, really, looking into it and seeing, it seems to be that, we need people like yourselves who are out there blowing the lids off these things and exposing the information, but there's no protection, John, is there? There's absolutely no protection, it seems.
Well, this is what I was discussing in Switzerland. They said, what is one of your goals? And I said, to get protection for those that speak out. The police is slightly different because the police, we're not subject to an employment law, so they can basically do whatever they want with us. Even the military have got stricter employment laws than we have, and protection orders, but we've got nothing. So when they go for you, they go with impunity. And we haven't got a union. We're not allowed a union. We've got a federation, which is pointless because it's police officers working for the Met Police. Although I did have myself a federation representative who, as a person, he was a good man. But, from his angle as a police federation representative, he was pointless and useless in that respect. And he won't mind me saying that because he did everything he could within his role. But the system won't allow it. So they really, really crush us. But, I've been in Parliament at many a meeting with various whistleblowers. And when you hear testimonies, and I've heard them from priests, the priests get a hard time. And, to a certain degree, we can understand why, because what has gone on in the religious institutions, I think it's going to be an international tragedy, when it really comes out. But there are good priests. And one priest, he blew the whistle on another priest who was sexually abusing members of his congregation. And he was thrown down the stairs of his church and made homeless by a bishop and another priest. So, I mean, you couldn't make it up. I've heard from a cardiologist, a consultant cardiologist who spoke out about people needlessly dying in hospitals. They accused him of stealing and he was arrested. And social workers, there was a very brave social worker in the Ascension Islands who exposed a lot of the abuse that was going on there, and she was arrested. So we get it across the board, and we've got to look at who's doing this, who is behind this, and who is sanctioning it. And the only thing with whistleblowers, when you blow the whistle and you stand up, you do stand alone. No one stands with you. So it is a decision that you can't take half-hearted. You really have to think strongly about what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate that. So this is what we're seeing, and this is certainly what I'm seeing. I've seen, whistleblower after whistleblower after whistleblower from the very high-profile cases. Now you see your Julian Assange, your Edward Snowden's, right down to our kind of I will say it, national heroes as far as I'm concerned. You know, at the end of the day, this information, that 3 hours with Shaun Attwood, that is going to absolutely blow some people's minds. Do you know what I mean? People who think, people have a certain belief about how things are, and when you look behind the veil and you see, you know, things for what they really are. And as I said, I've seen yourself. Carroll Woods is a very important case people need to be looking at. Are you familiar with the David Noakes and Lynn Thayer case? What's going on there?
Yeah. I've met with David in person, met with Lynn, and this was just before that they were arrested. I mean, they knew it was coming their way, and you could just feel the fear that was coming off of the pair of them. And you know, it's appalling. But the publicity that they've got, I mean, really, Ian R. Crane's done a brilliant job in getting their word out there. I saw in the newspapers the other day that they're now releasing some potent form of chemotherapy, which is meant to obliterate prostate cancer within 10 days. And although it's no good, and you know, chemotherapy does its own damage, but it seems weird that the government are bringing that out in the shadow of what has happened, the expose really of David Noakes. So that it's obviously the establishment have got a little bit of fear that this is going out, and really people should be taken to the streets over what they've done to that pair, because cancer is affecting 1 in 3 of us. So there's probably not a person, you know, on this planet that hasn't in some way, directly or indirectly, been affected by cancer. And it is just absolutely obliterating. It's a genocide against humanity, and there is a cure for it. So I think people need to get a grip and really, really get behind Ian R. Crane's campaign to get them admonished, you know, just get them looked after and get Lynn repatriated. But this just goes to show the lengths that they will go to, and they will stop at nothing. I mean, I've been contacted twice now by an ex-MI6 agent, and she's been really good in as much as she's given me so much information about the position that I've been in and what I could face if I continued down a certain path. And she was very open and candid with me. And one of the things that was happening was that I was getting approached by various political parties, mainly from the alt-right, asking me to take, you know, a stand with them when they do the talks. I said, we'll promote you, we'll give you, you know, the voice. And I've turned it down because my fight is not political, and I do not want to be aligned to any political party. I have no political opinion on this. My thing is straight down the line, you know. And she said, yeah, you've done a good thing, because if you would have aligned yourself politically, you would have been in a world of trouble. So you have to think about what you do, you know. And I was getting 1 million hits a month on my Facebook page, and I was told that's going to drop down, and it did. It dropped down almost overnight to 80,000, and it's going to continue decline from there. And to be honest, Facebook was taking over my life. It's quite a toxic thing, you know, and you can get caught up in this vile world, really. But it's a good platform, and YouTube and Twitter, of getting the alternative media out there.
Yeah, thanks, John. I see a lot of people now, and I've signed up for them myself. Is MeWe, Canon. These are kind of BitChute. These are kind of alternative kind of platforms, because censorship is rife, isn't it? You know, it's just properly being censored. Any information that's raising awareness of these important issues is just shut down left, right, and centre. And when you're saying then about, you know, the toxicity of these social media platforms, what I've been finding, I've been doing a lot of research and reading into it, is people who've fallen victim to these trolls and these orchestrated trolls, who are literally, it must be their full-time job, because the amount of content they put out.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen victim to that, and you can see it. Quite funny, because before Shaun Attwood put his video out, he did a precursor saying this will go out this time. And within the first, 40 minutes, it was hit massively by trolls, and they were dominating the thumbs down on the video. I mean, and at that time, it was near enough a third of the, the thumbs were thumbs down. But as within a day, I mean, they gave up within an hour. But it was different names with different message, with the same message. You could, even if you watched it in 10 minutes, you saw this pattern, this similarity, this loop, and it is well organized. And you know trolls, You've just got to drop them out and ignore them, and that's all they're worth. They're worth nothing. I mean, I make it no secret how to find me. My phone number's online, my address is even online, and once a month I'm outside Parliament at a set time, at a set day. And in all these people that have been mouthing off about me, well, come and see me, come up to my face and meet me one to one. And they don't, because a lot of them, that they are faceless, they are toothless, and they are cowards. They really are. So I would say to anyone, trolling does affect you, and it does. It gets under your skin, but it's petty and it's parasitic, and it's contemptible, and just ignore it.
I'm glad you said that, because, as you say, it's about getting face to face. It's easy to, and the thing is so divisive, John. This is the problem now. It's so divisive. There's so much disinformation, and everyone's got something to say about everybody else, and it's hard to know what's what. So what we do in Swindon here, there's a good group of us who come together every second and fourth Thursday for the Rabbit Hole, and there's a Mind, Body, Spirit group every Tuesday where people just come out and come together face to face. I think it needs to be a lot more of that going on, because being behind the computer screens is all good and well, and trying to put this information out is one thing, but actually, this, I want to come on to it in a minute with the riot stuff, but communications could go down at any time, and if things like that happen, then people need to be able to know where to meet up in the community and stuff. Well,
what people need to understand is, especially when it comes to child abuse, there's a lot of very, very damaged people out there, and for many reasons. I can understand why the police don't want me speaking out. That's quite obvious. I can understand why the government doesn't, because it will cause political instability, and it will cause financial instability when you realise how far these CEOs of these companies have been involved with paedophilia, and how many deals have been done on the backdrop of the bribery relating to paedophilia. I get that. But you also get people that are sex offenders themselves, and they won't like me. And you know what? If they don't like me, I've done a good job. And Satanists, because I speak out against satanic ritual abuse, which is a real thing, and it does go on. And the Satanists, they cannot stand me. They hate me. And you know what? I'm pleased. I'm absolutely pleased about that, because if you're going to have an enemy, have a Satanist as an enemy, because they're filth. So you can near enough see, when I speak about things, how people react. And there's a lot of people that have got guilty consciences, and they know what they've done. So rightly so, that they should hate me, because, I have equal amount of contempt for them. But I won't go online and slag people off. I'm not doing it. I've got no need to do it. There's a couple of people.
Waste of energy and time, innit?
Oh, I would love to wipe the floor with this guy. He's quite well known, but I'm not going to. I just don't want to. It's not what I'm about, and there's no need for it. So I won't waste my time with it.
Yeah, cheers, John. Appreciate that. Are you familiar with the case of Peter Forsher?
Do you know what? I know the name.
He was basically, I was listening to the AV9 conference talk by Mark Thompson, who works on UK Column.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And he was saying, apparently, this Peter Forsher fella, from what I can find online, there's not a great deal online. He's like an alternative historian with Napoleonic history, I think. But
yeah,
he was closely involved with somebody, Mark Thompson didn't name the fella, who is the successor, I think was the word, successor to Jimmy Savile in the Northern Pedocracy. And this guy was exposing stuff, apparently. He was chased across Europe and then sectioned for life in Austria.
Right.
The only psychiatric evaluation he's ever had done is in the UK, and he was deemed absolutely, normal and fine. But they've got this guy over in Austria who apparently does sections to order for essentially what we're talking about, political dissidents here, really, aren't we? That's what it basically boils down to.
They would have to do it in a European country, because you mentioned Napoleonic law, and there's a presumption of guilt that goes with that. Whereas we've got a fantastic system, and there's a lot of people that don't like our legal system, but I'd rather be under a common law with a presumption of innocence than under a Napoleonic law, And
but this is it. We've got that, and I will get on to that in a second, because I want to ask you about the common law thing. But what I'm seeing is the Mental Health Act, and that side of the system is just there. It's been put into place, and it's just so easy to just whisk people off under this Mental Health Act, and they just disappear and they're gone. And it's only lucky that we've got like good people on the ground who are actively working. Are you familiar with Neil Berry?
No.
No, she does some good work. She's very actively working in these kind of arenas. And as I mentioned about Carroll Woods, are you familiar with the Melanie Showcase?
Yeah, I am. I mean, there's a lovely lady who comes along to quite a few of our meetings, and I'll get a full name for you in a second. And she goes under the name of Sue, but she was in a children's home, and she was abused herself, but she reported the abuse of a younger girl by one of the teachers, and they sectioned her. She was sectioned at the age of 12 years old and put in a mental institution for years. And it was only by chance that she got out. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. She was in this place with absolute nutcases. So I've met people firsthand. And if we look, I used to do a lot of stuff. I love profiling, and an inexact science, but there's something in it. But there's a thing called geographical profiling, and it used to work very well with some of my sort of cross-county investigations I used to do. But when you look at the geography of things, when you look at what they used to do years ago, the magistrates' courts were built next to the police stations, and they're actually called the police courts. So it showed the closeness. But when we look at children's homes, the children's homes were always built next to, or vice versa, mental institutions. And kids, the victims and survivors of these places would say that if they spoke out, they were told that they would end up next door in the loony bin, the nut house, whatever. And they stayed there till they died. So they had them from cradle to grave, and they were just preyed on by pedos. So whatever the paedophiles liking was, and whatever age group, they had unfettered access. And there would be no recourse to justice. They'd get away with it.
Yeah, it's all out there now, isn't it? The information is all out there. There's no real hiding of it. It's they're trying to suppress it and whatnot, but it's just how to come to some kind of resolution with it all.
Well, we look at what's happened. One of the biggest pieces of criminal intelligence and information that we've had, right, has been with Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, unbelievable. If that had been anyone else, that'd be absolutely everywhere. And it's been totally whitewashed, covered over. The Brexit has taken over. I listen to the radio when I go to and from work, and sometimes during work, and I listen to LBC. And again, what an absolute load of old crap, because all they talk about constantly, on the whole, 90% of it, is Brexit. Where's the real news? Prince Andrew, that needs to be absolutely magnified.
Well, do you know what I found out? Sorry to interrupt you there, John. I found out looking at that, it's very telling information, and this is something you can give us on-the-ground confirmation to back up, is that, you've got different levels of clearance, when you apply for different jobs, and the deeper in you go, police, forensics, and all that kind of stuff. Vetting, yeah, and you've got to get some serious clearance levels. And some guy was talking about the Secret Service clearances. Sometimes it could take up to 10 months because they do such a deep background check. So to get into these jobs, intelligence, police, kind of high-level police and all the rest of it, you have these extensive vetted background checks. But yeah, we've got these people, around, as you say, Prince Andrew and all the rest of it. Well, as if they didn't, as if you're surrounded by the largest intelligence service, MI5, MI6 on the planet, and all the rest of them connected, CIA, Mossad, and all the rest of it. And they didn't know what these people were up to.
Well,
it's all just out there now, isn't it?
I'm going to give you a real-life example. I got accepted for a job, and it was dealing with very sensitive top-secret information. Now, information is graded in 5 bands, and it's color-coded accordingly. So top secret is red, and then it's a bit like a judo belt, it's right the way down. I can't remember exactly, I think like orange or something, or yellows at the bottom. Now, to order to sort of disseminate and handle that information, you have to be vetted to a high degree. It's called developed vetting. And I went through and I passed developed vetting. Now, they need to know everything about your life, your schooling, your education, your family life. They need to know your financial situation, and they will find out anyway. So they give you an opportunity to tell them, and they find out anyway. And if anything contradicts, you're gone. Right? And one of the other things they want to know about your sexual history. Now, this is where political correctness goes totally out the window, because they want to know all your sexual partners, and you're to write them down. And if you're involved in things like swinging, wife swapping, cruising, if you're homosexual, if you're lesbian, if you're bisexual, you've got to tell them. If you go dogging, they want to know. And again, if they find out that you're on these dating websites, you're gone, you're not even allowed on there. And it was a woman detective sergeant said to me, and she's a lesbian, and she said, you know, a lot of lesbians and gays do not pass the vetting because of their propensity to have, you know, more than average amount of sexual partners. And she said it's just how it is. So that in mind, when you take people like Leon Britton, like Ted Heath, you know, I went for a job that was handling sensitive top secret information. These people were part of the top secret and sensitive information. So when you got Leon Britton become Home Secretary and then went out to Northern Ireland, when you got Ted Heath went from a backbench minister, you know, all the way through to Prime Minister, they would have known the ins and outs of his life. He was cruising for young boys when he was just a backbench minister. They knew what he was doing. Special branch would have known what he was doing, and further down the line, he would have then sort of got protection officers, prot officers as they call them, and they would have known exactly what they'd done. And I was approached by a former protection officer for Leon Britton, and he said, we knew what he was up to, the young boys. And he even said to me, he said he was even caught cruising for young boys around Victoria train station, around the toilets. You know, back in the day, it was a well-known gay cruising area. And he was just grabbed hold of and told to go back home. Ted Heath was accosted by two officers when he was Prime Minister. There was protection officers, and they turned around to him. They actually came forward and they confronted him about the amount of young boys that were being delivered to the residency of number 10 back in the day. Now, let's look at that. Let's look at the chain of events. Young boys, right? With Ted Heath, I've spoken and I've given interviews of people that have been the victims of his sexual, you know, predation. And they've spoken openly and candidly about that man. So it's no secret. And there's still debunkers on that. And one of the biggest debunkers is Ian Hislop and Rosie Waterhouse of Private Eye magazine. As soon as you mention anything about Ted Heath or about satanic abuse, those Muppets come on board. And I am calling them out, right? And the other one, you know, Leon Britton, with the young boys. And you think, right, so young boys being delivered, okay, a cab driver has to deliver them. So who is that cab driver? How is that cab driver then allowed in to number 10? So it'd have to be a parliamentary driver. And then they'd get through security. Well, who's on security? Who is allowing them young boys at unsocial hours and are leaving probably in the early hours into that building, knowing exactly what they're there for? The special branch knowing exactly what's going on. And then all the security stages, the checks that they have to go through, and people just willingly you can't just walk through airport security onto a plane. And it'll be the same as when you go into these buildings, and anyone that's had to go into Parliament or into the Royal Palaces knows exactly how stringent that is. And I'm going to call out special branch officers who knew what was going on and did F all about it. You cowards, shame on you. I'm going to be talking to, calling out, the protection officers who knew what was going on. Do you know, shame on you. And I say to these people, these coppers, I said, did you not have children? Do you not have nieces and nephews or even grandchildren? What if that was one of your kids and you shut your flipping mouths over this and done nothing? That's appalling. And if I had it my own way, I'd bring in a law that any copper who shuts his mouth over this, they should be held accountable to the law. You know, they should be arrested and interviewed under caution for that, and then maybe face, you know, whatever the offence is. I think is something in the public office. Oh, it'll come to me in a minute. You know, and that's how it should be. I think they brought in Australia now that anyone who's working with children, that if they don't report anything, it is an offence. So
misfeasance, is it? Misfeasance in the public office.
Yeah, malfeasance in the public office.
Yeah.
That is a word, yeah. So this is what I bring in. And, you know, when I was being interviewed in Switzerland for the news channel there, they said to me, do you know of any other police whistleblowers? I went, they're so few and far between. They are about. and more coming forward. And I like to think that myself and the other early stage whistleblowers have been instrumental in giving these people like the support and bolstering up their backbone to speak out. And hopefully, you know, things will change internally that will make the path a lot easier. But those that sanction the attack on myself and on the other brave whistleblowers, not just in the police, do you know what? Shame on them. Shame on them, because what they've done is they have allowed the abuse, the sexual abuse of children to continue. And every single one of them people in that sort of audit trail, from the one given the order right down to the ones enacting the order, you know, they are all complicit in it. And my God, they need to answer for what they've done. You know, whatever's happened to me, that's been and done. I've got broad shoulders. It was painful and it hurt, but I've lived with it and I've got on with my life, you know, and that's that. But how many children have been allowed to be abused because they have failed to police the streets of London properly? And when I spoke out initially in 2006 and I identified what was going on in the children's homes and on the streets of London, when they attacked me, they never employed another police officer to look at that problem for the next 7 years until Jimmy Savile was publicly outed. And then they knew they had to do something. So all them police commissioners, you know, Bernard Hogan-Howe, Cressida Dick, you know, shame on them. Shame on them. They should be held accountable. And I've got a civil case going, and hopefully they will do. And I'm due to give evidence at the independent child sexual abuse, the ICSA inquiry, the government inquiry next month. And if asked, you know, and if it's relevant, then I will be saying my piece, you know, because it needs to be said. Sorry, stay there. I'll just drop my phone.
That's all right.
The public needs to know how badly they've been failed. But the public, you know, they don't care. I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, if I was caught on camera kicking a dog up the backside, you know, I'll be in trouble. But the children, what is happening and what has happened to our children in care homes, in mental institutions and on the streets of London, and no one gives a shit. It is so heartbreaking.
It is. There's a spectrum, John. You've got a lot of people who just find it too difficult to even look into, and you know, it is what it is. I accept that. Everyone's different, but there are a lot of people who are fully awakened to the real deep level of this fuckeries, and yeah, something needs to be done. So you're saying about going to the government inquiry in the court. What is your understanding of what's going on the ground level then? So, for example, I'm seeing that there's some good people on the ground convening common law courts, bringing these people to account. But yet, unfortunately, they don't have any teeth being common law courts. But apparently Anthony Stansfeld, I think it is he the Thames Valley guy?
Yeah, I met with him twice, Anthony Stansfeld. Yeah, Stansfeld, yeah. He seems a nice guy. He's a little bit, how do I put this? I want to be polite about this. A bit clueless, really.
Right, okay.
His heart's in the right place, but when it comes to the dynamics of what's going on, he's not really aware of it, you know. And I suppose that's just because of it. He's, you know, because he's quite an upper class sort of chap, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. But his heart's in the right place, and he's doing the right things. And you know, he gave me his private ear the other week. I met with him in his office in Westminster. And he wanted to know some of the information that I had, and I gave it to him, and he did take it to the Home Secretary, and I know he did. So good on him. But I said to him, Anthony, this has been done so many times before. This information has been to the Home Secretary, you know, and it was under Amber Rudd when my plight was given to her by the policing minister, and then the next day she removed the policing minister from his post and told him not to get involved, and basically threatened him, you know, to stay away. So these Home Secretaries, they know what's going on, but again, they don't give a toss. And one brave MP that's been really championing a lot of this has said to me, look, it's way above any MP's pay scale. You won't get any joy from them, you know, even the well-meaning ones. You know, you can go to them and all that, but nothing's going to happen. And unfortunately, that's a brutal reality that I've had to sort of, you know, accept, You know, I really thought I've got one MP, everyone will be panicking, and they're not panicking. I mean, the policing minister at the time, very, very brave guy, like the Right Honourable Sir Michael Penning, and he deserves that title because he is honourable. He's got honour. And he summons Cressida Dick into Parliament and said, get into Parliament, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, I need to talk to you. And he said she didn't even bother turning up. You know, so that's the contempt that they have. And again, they have no teeth. Now, going on to the common law, I know that back in 2011, 2012, when students were rioting, I was on a unit, a specialist unit at the time, and I was in the court. So detectives spend an inordinate amount of time in the court system. You know, we near enough. Well, we actually do the barristers' jobs for them. It's just they're the mouthpieces that have this gift of advocacy and get out there and argue the toss over anything. And then on a couple of occasions, and I'll tell you, one of them was in Horsery Road Magistrates Court, always in the Magistrates Court. The other one was in, sorry about it, there's a junkie button part. The other one was in Hammersmith Court, that the freemen of the land have turned up and have represented them. And I can remember the usher saying to me, can you clear the courts, help clear the courts? Because we need to get the court empty and another judge in, because we've got one of the freemen has turned up and he's representing himself and he's using his common law stance. And they went and removed the judge they had and put a specific judge in. So even back then in 2012, circa 2011, you know, they were aware of the impact that this common law stuff does, and they were really versed on it. So when they make out that, oh, it's a nonsense and ignore it, you know, that's just a facade, that they're fully aware of the impact that it has. So I say to them, keep going. And I've spoke with John Smith, who runs a lot of the common law stuff, and he did offer to help me, but unfortunately my thing it's on a different level to really where, you know, and at the time I didn't think it would forward me, you know, that much, but yeah, the courts might ignore it, but they've just got to keep going. They've got to keep going, and eventually they will get a success. They will do. It's
I
not
think it's about unifying, isn't it? There's so many different groups. So, you know, you've got your kind of field of what you're doing, and then you've got, you know, your common law, and there's the 5G awareness, and there's health awareness, and there's community groups of all different varieties. And that's what we're kind of all about on the podcast, kind of getting all the information out on the table so everyone can just see what's going on. Then also trying to find the solutions. It's only by bringing these groups together that we can get a lot more cohesion, I think, John, on the ground, because it's just so divided, isn't it? It's really divided. That's why I see it's kind of, it's not good.
People aren't interested. They don't care. And that's the other thing. That is a brutal reality. You know, you have to sink into your head that as much as it means something to you, they ain't bothered. And they're not. They really aren't bothered. And it's trying to find some common ground where it will sort of put a spark in people and make them listen. But I don't know what the catalyst for that will be. But there will be one. I genuinely think that people need to get behind David Noakes, because what he's potentially on the cusp of, you know, was curing cancer once and for all, and many other things. And, you know, it's massive, absolutely massive. That guy's a saint, what he's done, you know, an absolute hero. And it needs the people he's helped and cured. Where the hell are they? Why aren't they coming forward?
Well, this is my question, John, because I chatted to Dr. Jennifer Daniels earlier on today, and she had quite a journey of her own, kind of got into the medical system through Harvard and saw, you know, that things weren't as she was led to believe, and went down her own path. But her opinion of GC math was not good, shall we say. So I've only seen what I've shared recently, which was through Caroline Stevens' interviews with David Noakes, and I've seen all the statistics. I've shared what they're saying, and, you know, they're saying about peer-reviewed papers and all the rest of it. But as you say, where are the witnesses? Where are the people who've been treated by him? They should be out en masse, in force, if there's so many of them, right? So I keep an open mind to everything. You know, I also question everything as well.
Yeah, that's right, and rightly so as well. And I know people that have taken cannabis oil and they've got cancer and it's made no difference. it just made them incredibly dizzy and off their heads. But there's others that swear by it. So I mean, when we look at it, really, I mean, what about sunlight and exercise? You know, one of the biggest cure-alls there are. You know, get up, get in the fresh air, and do some exercise and get some sunlight on you. Fantastic what it will do. I mean, sugar is a thing that's causing it. Sugar. I can always remember being in Lithuania, and everyone out there, the women were just pencil thin and the men were just built like athletes. They were built like gymnasts, and they drink and they eat pork fat. And I said, why have none of you fat? They said, because we don't have sugar. There is hardly any sugar in our diet. And our diets now, what's the sugar? When I was growing up, we had one fat kid in our class. Well, I think in the school, one fat kid, a couple of chubby ones, but on the whole, one. But now, you know, you see these children, and it's a crime, really, to let your kids get like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad to see.
And and that's where the cause of cancer. Cancer lives in an acidic environment, and sugar causes acidity.
Well, something I found out yesterday from someone close to me, Iceland just expanding massively. And, you know, Iceland, yeah, fair play, you can probably get a few little good bits and bobs in it, but generally the most of it is just processed crap, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because most people, you know, a lot of people are on the breadline. They have to make do with what they get, and it's just, you know, it's all been done by design. It's kind of...
Oh, of course, this has been planned for generations, and one of the things I talk about is single parenting. And I've upset a couple of people in my stance on single parenting. But I was a single parent, and I said to one woman, no one will understand a single mother more than me. I'm not a misogynist. I've been there. And I had 4 kids and of all ages, and one of them was an infant. I know it. I've done the nappy changing. I've done the whole thing right the way through. Washing, ironing, and still doing it to this day. You know, and I get it. But it's not right, single parenting. It isn't right. And the girls were encouraged back from the 80s onwards, you know, that if they had kids, they would be supported and they will be financially rewarded. And that's where it started. And it was a slow decline, and it was. And if you spoke out against it, you was, I don't know what that would call you and all that, but a snob or whatever. But I'm far from a snob, but I am a realist. And I know they did it on purpose. Local authorities housed them. You know, they weren't really worried if a father's name went on the birth certificate. And it was the whole social attitude towards it. And the part of London that I started working in, Southeast London, the schools there, the primary schools there, there was a good percentage of the kids were from single parent families. You know, it was just a social decline, and you saw it happening. And then what happens to them, their children? It's a norm. You know, a girl needs a father so she can understand a man and the decency of a man. And I'm talking about good men here, not horrible pervs or you know, violent people, good people. And a boy needs a mother so he can understand and respect a woman. And that's how it should be, you know. And when you are a single parent, your family is weak. And sex offenders will prey on single mums. They will. It's a fact. And these men that sit there and they say, oh, the mother's looking after the kid, it doesn't need me. Well, who's putting your kid to bed at night? You don't know. And actually, you're failing as a man. You are not a man if you don't know who's tucking your child in at night. Now, there are men whose wives have run off or girlfriends have run off and not let. I'm not on about that. There are bizarre, quirky circumstances that do occur, and we allow for that. But on the whole, it was all done too freely. And you are not a man if you abandon your child. You are not.
No, you're exactly right. And also we've seen the degradation of the family unit, you know, over this time. And I wanted to ask you, actually, so you've segued into it nicely, about you saw the degradation socially through, you know, the breaking down and the measurements that were put into place and all that kind of stuff. And then also as kind of parallel to that, how the police changed, you know, where it used to be a lot more constabulary, local bobby based kind of stuff, whereas now just kind of, it's a force, isn't it, really? And that's just to say, I must say, I will just just add into that. I can only speak from my own experiences, and I've had extremely unpleasant experiences with police, but I've also had some really top, decent human beings while I've been through those experiences as well. So there's good and bad in everything, you know what I mean? And we're just trying to get, you know, a bit of balance here. But
most of the people now that I work with and I'm good friends with have come from the criminal classes. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way, and I have. I mean, I would say my best friend, you know, has spent most of his life in prison. You know, and the people that I do a lot of work with, and have been at the raw end of police brutality as well. You know, one of them, he's been kicked black and blue by the police. And the gangsters, the ex-gangsters that I do a lot of stuff with, you know, when you talk to them and you say to them, look, what is your opinion of the police? And he's saying, we need a police force. And we do. And we need coppers that don't back down. But I know where you're coming from, because I've seen police brutality, and I have, especially in violent areas. You know, the police give it and take it, you know. And I've seen corruption, and I have. And it's sickening, and I've seen how it works. And I've been a victim of it myself. And I nearly lost everything due to corruption within the police. And I think the police do need to be held accountable. But I had one guy contact me, and he wanted to do an interview, and he said, oh, have you seen this website that exposes police corruption? And I went, no. And then he named it, and I thought, I have seen a video. And I saw this video that they put out, and they're purporting to be exposing police corruption. And it was a young lad in the Metropolitan Police area, which, bear in mind, has had their numbers monumentally slashed to an all-time low. You know, you're going back to almost Victorian policing levels now. And there's violence now, whereas years ago, we would go out mob-handed in a rough area, and we had the backup, and we did have the backup. Now they got no backup, and really it's flipped round, you know. The police are backing away, and the public are not being served. And this kid is screaming and shouting with his ass batten out, and there's another copper rolling around on the floor while there's a crowd goading them, and they're filming it, right? And he's screaming, get back. And this guy reckons that was police corruption. I said, that is a young kid that needs a sit down, a cup of tea, a cigarette, you know, and a bit of wisdom and an arm round him. That's a kid who's probably frightened to death, who's probably run ragged and is out of his depth. That is not police corruption. I said, you have no idea what corruption is. When there is corruption and people collude and conspire together, you know, to bring about someone's demise, do you really think they're going to do it on the street where people can film it and video it? And, you know, again, it's demonising the police when they don't need to. There are coppers that need demonising, that need actually banging up in prison. But these ones on the street, you know, they need a bit of support, because they are losing a battle here. They really are, and it's sad to see. And, you know, police stations are always in the middle of town where everyone could get to them. You could report crime, and whatever you reported on the whole would get looked at. I know a guy that works in the crime reporting unit, which used to be in every single police station, of which there were many. You know, there's 34 boroughs, I think, in London, and each one of them boroughs, back in the day when I was there, would have 5 or more police stations. Now they're amalgamating boroughs. So there's not even one police station within a borough, some of them. So that is, where do people report crime? Now, every crime got reported, and it got screened, whether in or out, whether, you know, people do make up some crap, you know, and they do. But on the whole, they get looked at. He said now they are told to get rid of 80% of all reported crime. 80%, and that has come from high up and dictated downwards, that you will get rid, and that's it, just bosh, non-investigating 80% of all crime. How absolutely disgusting is that? And where's that reported in the newspapers? Nowhere. You know, they're going on about the stats on rape. Well, of course the rapes are going up. No one's investigating it. People are not even reporting crimes because they don't want to, because it ain't going to go anywhere. And where do they report it? Years ago, you could go in a police station face to face and report a crime. You try ringing anywhere up now, you can't get through to anyone. You can't. It's a nonsense. It's all online. How many people haven't got computers? There's loads. A lot of the old haven't got computers, and it's absolutely disgusting. And we're allowed. I've got
it written down here. Sorry to interrupt you, John, but I've got it written down here to ask you about. It's the same. I've got a personal. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a friend who's worked in the ambulance service, and the way that was just dismantled and privatised, and just it's what they've done with everything, isn't it? Is there any? I was reading something before about an act that was passed that allows, in the case of civil unrest or national emergency, the police to grant power of police to third parties. Do you know anything about that?
Well, they're already doing it. I was contacted today by a recruitment agency and asking if I would like to go into a local force to investigate crime for them because my CV's with them. It's pointless me applying for it because every time I apply for one of these jobs, when I get vetted, I come back as an activist. So I'm not even allowed in police stations. So they won't have it. So it's pointless. But what was said to me was, you will be given designated powers of arrest and search. So they're giving me, as a civilian, powers of arrest above that of a common person, right? Any person powers, I get above and beyond them powers, and I get powers to search as well.
So from the horse's mouth, ladies and gentlemen, from the horse's mouth. And that's just one aspect of it there, isn't it? Yeah, that's obviously, you know, private interests profiteering probably from taxpayers' money by employing private detectives. But what other kind of areas could we see this moving into, you know?
Well, I mean, they've already got it in prisons. There's a prison near where I am at the moment, and it's called, it used to be HMP Mount, the Mount. And now you go past, the sign just says the Mount. So the HMP's gone. So they've all the prisons have been privatised, you know, and that's it. On. And with that, I did a prison visit 2 months ago, and it was one of these civilian-run prisons, and the staff are just appalling. You know, they're just a mess. You know, one bloke, he didn't even have a belt. His trousers kept falling down. And I said to the guy, I went to see, I said, what they like? He said, they're thick. He said, they're not paid. They're paid such bad money. You know, they're just out of agencies and giving them these jobs. You know, prisons are a fragile environment. You know, with the right staff, it can be a place of reconciliation and healing with the right staff, you know, but they're not interested in that. We've got to look at countries that succeed, right? Unfortunately, we take you know, guidance from a failing system, the American system, and we have a recidivism rate, a re-offending rate of 75 to 80%. So it don't work, right? Whereas you take the Scandinavian countries, they've got a non-offending rate of 75 to 80%. You know, they come back and there's healing in there. And I was talking, I think I was talking to that Andy Stansfield, and I said to him, right, I'm going to give you an example. I said, you want an extension built, and I said, I am going to recommend you a builder, right? And I strongly advise you to take this builder. And I said, he will build that place, but bear in mind that 75 to 80% of all extensions he's built have fallen down. Now, are you going to still employ him? And he went, well, of course not. I said, well, why have we got to accept that shit that they give us about the prison system then? And that's it. It just isn't working. It's failing. They've lost control. Therefore, the bullying increases, the violence increases, and it's almost like a third world prison where the guards just step outside and let the rest of them get on with it. You know, what have we done? We're paying for this, and we're paying big money for this. Our population has never been so dense. And I don't mean in an intellectual way. I mean just in numbers. But, you know, all the money that they are dragging out of us. So why are we allowing them to get away with it? But years ago, people took to the streets, and they did. No one does anymore. They're not bothered. They really ain't bothered.
And with regards to people taking to the streets, you see what's going on now in Hong Kong, you know, it's absolute chaos over there. And I don't, like, it's not going to be advisable. So with regards to when the riots kicked off, you know, the big London riots, the fires and all the rest of it, I heard tell of supposed whistleblowing that they were ready to lock and load the units of police, and they were told to stand down to let it ferment.
They were stood down. They stood down, and there was a senior officer. Now, again, there'll be a time and a place to name this person. She went from a senior Met police officer to a chief constable, and she was in charge. And there were units were calling up from all over the UK, saying, "Our men are ready. We can come and we can help and we can stop this." And she stood everyone down. And it got to a point where Wood Green and Tottenham were getting absolutely desperate. That could have been stopped early doors, and they allowed it, put in monumental, you know, amounts of the public at risk because of the fires. and the loss to business and everything else. She could have stopped that, and she didn't. She stood everyone down, and I believe she did so because she was ordered to and allowed it to continue.
Yeah, I would. That is what I heard, and it makes sense when you know these people operate, because it also seems then as a result of that there was a lot more. Like when I served my 7 years, at one point I spent some time with a fella. He got 4 years for inciting riots on Facebook. So there was laws introduced.
I'm going to give you a first-hand example of that. When the student riots occurred, I was seconded, just dragged in to a unit that was investigating the rioting, right? And I spent a lot of time in the central London courts with the students, right? And they put on. We had a barrister, 2 barristers were sent down from the CPS to work with us 24 hours. They were on call. The courts opened 24 hours. Never happened before. 24-hour courts right the way through, right? We never went home. We stayed at work. It was just full on. And there was, the students were being sent to the magistrates court, and they were all represented by the same solicitors firm, right? Bindmans represented them. Now, I watched what this firm did. This firm stitched them up, and it did. And I'll tell you how. There was one lad, right, and the judge had seen the evidence, and it was a Bow Street. It might have been Hull Street. One of the central. Anyway, I'll get a bit confused with him. But he turned around and he said, "I've seen the evidence, young man." And he said, "I've seen your antecedents. I've seen your income and everything else." He said, "I will treat you fairly." And he said, "You will walk away from my court with a fine, but you need to admit to what you've done." So his legal team jumped up and said, "This isn't due process. My client has a right to take this to committal, which means Crown Court, and we're going to exercise that right." And he turned around to the judge. He said, "I get that. It is his right, but I'm speaking to him and saying, son, I will treat you fairly. You will walk from here." So that kid was getting a fine, and he was going home. Right? His solicitors, and they did this to most of their clients, took it to Crown Court. They got sent to Kingston Crown Court, very white, middle-class, snotty part of London. And I watched that kid get 18 months sentence. Got found guilty, 18 months, and they all did. They all got sent to prison. They weren't criminals. They were just angry. Some of them were stupid what they did. They got carried away, and that was that. But the effort that they put into policing was monumental, and the budget was phenomenal. So why can't they do that for child abuse? Why?
Well, this is it, isn't it? It's allocation of resources for wherever they deem fit. So what do you know about how much more equipment and stuff that was bought? I saw reports of them buying a lot more kind of these almost American-looking kind of response vehicles after the riots then.
Yeah,
response.
Water cannons, and they had these big blue trucks, these armoured ones.
Yeah, like Americanized blue trucks. Yeah. So
they're all based down in Gravesend, down in Kent. That's their centre for it all. That's where the water cannons and everything else are. But there were a lot of them. They were driving around all over the place. And also, what they did during the riots, they did forced mobilisation, so that they dragged everyone in from all around the country. And this was just before they started making like what they call tri-counties, where they started amalgamating things like Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire. And I think now Thames Valley, which is a huge force which goes from Milton Keynes in the north, has now tied in with Hampshire, so the officers can operate from Milton Keynes to the Isle of Wight. Massive. But the Scottish forces were brought down, right? Strathclyde and Lothian Borders and all them. They've got no jurisdiction. So they were dragged into a big hall, and the commissioner read out some sort of bit of legislation, giving them all jurisdiction for a period of time, so or extending their jurisdiction to the UK. And then when it was finished, then they withdrew it. So different to ours, and they've got no power to work down here, and vice versa. But they were given it, so they can do it if they want to. And that was
they can do whatever they want, doesn't it?
And the one thing is the military can't operate because you know that's just a constitutional thing. That's why the royal family are protected by the police and not by the military. You know, whereas I think everyone, they have the military protecting, whereas here we've still got a civilian police force that does it. It was explained to me the ins and outs of why, but I got bored and I've forgotten.
Yeah, no, I forget more than I retain myself, so I can relate to that, John. I've been hearing about this stuff with the live life claim, and which then makes you a non-combatant with regards to kind of potential military occupation. There's so much going on with all that, the Lisbon Treaty and all the rest of it. You can just get absorbed in all of it, so I tend not to. It'll be what it'll be. It's so much just distraction and shenanigans. I tend not to take too much time.
When there was a lot of stuff coming out from the alternate media and the freemen and all this, and there was going on about the City of London being a principality of its own right, and it was only when that, because of my case, that there's going to be some issues with the City of London police, and I went before the policing minister and we were discussing it, and he turned around to me and said, they're a law unto themselves. And I said, have you got any jurisdiction over them? He went, no, no one has. He said, even Parliament has got no jurisdiction over them. And when you look at their warrant cards, they're the only police force in the Commonwealth, you know, so even Jamaica, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and these overseas dependents, they've got what they call the King Edward's coronet, which is the crown. And that is on the insignia of the military and on the police. But the City of London's got 2 griffins. There's no coronet on it at all. So there's no, you know, so even he knew that you know, on a parliamentary level, the City of London is on its own.
Yeah, we're all in jurisdictions, aren't we? And then it comes, you know, you've got the City of London, its own principality, the one world currency, and Vatican's got its own principality, the one world religion, Washington DC, one world military, and then the Bank of International Settlements over in Basel, they're above and beyond the law as well. Have you seen the Roland, you would have seen the Roland Bernard videos, right? The Dutch banker, the elite banker. Did you see his stuff?
Yeah, Roland Bernard.
Roland Bernard, yeah.
Yeah, I've met him. Yeah.
Okay. Him. What did you make of Roland?
Yeah, strange man.
Strange?
Yeah, very strange guy. Yeah.
I imagine the life he's led will do that to you.
I think he's got more to say than he'll ever say, to be honest.
Well, yeah. The stuff he had to say was shocking enough.
I think there's no spectator sport in that game. And, yeah, he couldn't look me in the eye. He's very furtive around. But, you know, big respect to what he's done. Again, I'm not going to knock anyone. I've got my own opinion. But, yeah, he's odd, to say the least.
Yeah.
But very revealing. But you know, I've had a lot of people speak to me that have been victims of satanic abuse, a hell of a lot, and you know what goes on in there. And
but people will say, sorry to interrupt you, John, but people will say, it just doesn't exist, satanic panic.
Yeah.
So you still get more research and have a look. You know, there's a lot of testimony and stuff out there.
You know, one guy said to me, who spent his whole sort of working life seeking out Satanists, and he's turned around and went, yeah, there is satanic panic. They're panicking.
Is that Wilfred Wong?
Yeah, what a guy.
Yeah, Wilfred the gentleman. I've reached out to him. I'm hoping to have a chat with him soon. You know, he's busy.
I'll arrange that for you.
If you would, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, I'd love to chat with him. Cause,
that's what a true man is, Wilfred Wong. I mean, that man is fearless.
Yes.
And I mean, absolutely fearless. He's he's been very, very helpful to me, you know.
On that note, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, that'd be absolutely amazing, because it is important information, and it's not very nice. I know it's not very nice, but a lot of people are ready to hear it. They are at that point where they want to know what's going on, and to actually get a grip and know what's going on, you have to have a working knowledge of all this stuff, and it is unfortunately very unpleasant, but it is what it is. This is where we're at. This is where we found ourselves. What I wanted to say there, John, you say about being fearless, you know, people cast aspersions, yeah. So, for example, people I know will be watching this, you know, say I've asked you about like Carroll Woods, for example. She was lifting the lid on the social services up north, and now she's been, you know, she's had a hard old story. People need to look into that one. And people will say, you know, how come you managed to stay out and do your thing, even though arguably you're exposing higher level stuff? But I think if you're fearless in what you do, I think there is a level of, and this is getting a little bit kind of deep, but there's a level of protection above and beyond.
Well, I believe in Jesus, not in a religious way. I've relinquished any ties I had to the Catholic Church because I come from a Catholic family. My father's side Italian, and it was you know, very strong in them communities. And I want nothing to do with the Catholic faith no more, because I've been to break bread with them and ask them what they're going to do to help as my spiritual leader, and they couldn't give a shit. And I went to see the Cardinal, who he did have dealings with me by letter, but when it come to meeting him, he deputised it to his bishop, and he basically couldn't see any wrongdoing, you know, or anything the Catholics could do to help. So I washed my hands with him, but I believe in Jesus, and I just think he's got a job for me, and I will do it, and the children need help, you know, and they need protecting, and if it means that I've got to stand up and take some flack, then I will stand up and take some flack. My fear is nothing compared to the fear of a child that's being abused, right? And that's how I keep context. And if people want to attack me, do you know what? Goods, have a go, do whatever you want. I really don't care. And I tell you what, look at people questionably that have to attack those who are exposing child abuse. You know, I work, like I said, with people. Most of the people I work with now have been in prison. Oh, they don't hate me. They got no problem with me. You know, in fact, we've got love for each other. You know, mutual respect for each other. But those that are going out their way to cause division and hatred in this very, very fragile world, look on them with very suspicious eyes. You know, and that's all I say. And I say that to the victims as well. Stop fighting with each other, because there is a lot of paranoia and anger, and rightly so, and I get that. But, you know, other victims aren't your enemy. Those that did this are your enemy. And anyone who has sex with a child is evil. Whatever way you want to look at it, whether you're a religious person or not, or you believe in a deity or not, you're doing the work of evil in doing that. And you are destroying that little child's soul. And they're going to carry that for the rest of their life. And do you know what? People get on with their lives and all that, but that pain is there forever, and it never heals. And it gets salt rubbed into that real deep, dark, profound wound when our police fail to investigate it. And then when there are those that we've seen recently that have come forward and spoke out against prominent members of our society that have been fucking about with kids, and they end up going to prison themselves, or those that have stood up against the abuse and they've gone to prison. And that is just appalling, and we're seeing that happening. And I'm going to say that has occurred with the Carroll Beach trial.
I was literally just about to ask you about Carroll Beach, so I'm glad you've gone to that. Yeah.
And I'll give my opinion on this, because
I'm glad you would. Yes, please do.
Is a man that has got convictions of indecent images, and shame on him for that. And really, well, he knew that he had that, and so he's got to be an idiot to think that that wasn't going to get dragged out. Unfortunately, there is a statistic that a percentage of those that have been abused go on to abuse, and a huge percentage of child abusers have been abused themselves. And in no way am I saying all child victims are. I'm not saying that. I want to make that 100% clear. But unfortunately, it is a byproduct. However, he's a man of discreditable conduct and probably a paedophile, right? If that's what we want to term a paedophile. So I'm not defending him on that respect. However, he's a victim and survivor of high-level child abuse, and he's a brave man for standing out. And this has happened on a few occasions. We saw it with Esther Baker standing out, and they get vilified, they get attacked, and they get hammered by the likes of Daniel Janner, Lord Janner's son. And again, you get people like Ian Hislop and the Private Eye magazine absolutely smashing into them. Just because someone has got bad character doesn't mean that they are a liar in that respect. And just because someone has proven to be a liar in the past doesn't mean they're a liar all the time. Now, in 2003, the government passed the Criminal Justice Act of 2003 in respect to bad character. And people thought it was a revelation and a step forward in our judicial process, that prolific burglars, for instance, are going to be, the jury is going to be told that this man is a thief during the trial, right? As opposed to, you know, post-conviction, and then it was brought out then. So people see, but the reason they brought that, in my opinion, was that they knew these child abuse allegations were going to hemorrhage at some point, and they brought it in because, let's look at this, right? One sec. I'm still with you. Sorry about that. It's
Okay,
just
that's right.
yeah, it's down to 20%, but I've still got quite a bit of time. Let's look at our prison population. 80% of people in the lower categories prisons have come from abuse backgrounds, not necessarily sexual abuse, but childhood abusive backgrounds. Right? People that have been sexually abused have got a proclivity, a proliferation to self-medicate, whether it be alcohol or Class A drugs. And if it's Class A drugs, on the whole, it's going to be heroin, which is an analgesic and it's a painkiller. In order to maintain a heroin addiction, because you're going to get addicted to the stuff, because that's just how it goes with that, you're going to steal. And if you steal, you're going to get caught at some point, right? And that's going to make you a person of dishonesty. So you are a dishonest person. So years later, if you decide to come forward as someone who's living on the street, who's a heroin addict with millions of convictions for shoplifting, you've been in a care home, they're going to look at your bad character, not just your criminal bad character, your previous convictions. They can look at your bad character at school. They can look at your bad character in the care homes. So if you've made an allegation, like many of them did, against the workers in the care homes, and then were called liars, and it was written off as being delusional and a lie, you are then going to say, oh, look, she was a liar in the care home, or he was a liar in the care home, made allegations against this and did it again, gone through all their life making allegations. And that is exactly what they've done with Carl Beach. And his defence team, they called him a liar. They had every right then to call the prosecution witnesses like Harvey Proctor, who has got convictions against young boys and is a man of, discreditable sexual misconduct. They never attacked him, and they had every right to do so, but they didn't. So it was a stitch up. And to give him 18 years, my God. And again, I'm not defending him because he is what we call a nonce.
So on that note, if I may, John, and I'm not trying to defend anyone either, but the only thing I found was that he'd been caught with a bit of software disguised as a calculator app which concealed pornography on his computer. And my mind, being a little bit of a tinfoil hat wearer, I thought that could easily have been planted. Is there any, from what you know of, because you probably would know more than me if you've been on the ground, was there any witness evidence, or was it literally just pictures on his computer through some kind of app that, to my mind, anyone can get stitched up with that stuff I've seen, you know?
The person to ask, and I'll be meeting him tomorrow, is a journalist, the only journalist that followed it through, Mark Watts, that was at Xaro News, and he's the only journalist of any merit that has followed the IICSA inquiry through, and he's put a full-on blog about what he knows the trial inside out because he was there throughout.
Oh, brilliant.
Mark Watts. So I can put you in touch with Mark
Watts. Yes, please. I'd love to chat with him. Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, there's stuff I know that I can't say.
Yeah, I understand, John. Yeah, I do. The thing I just wanted to say was, go on, sorry.
In Harvey Proctor, and I'd like to say it, but I can't. But all is not as it seems with these people,
I was in the pub, John, and I went in, I was at Dorset camping, and I went in the pub to get a couple of lemonades, and I looked on the screen and it said, Carl, I'd only heard of it a few days previously through comments on other videos, a Shaun Attwood video actually, saying to ask about it, and it said, Carl Beach gets 18 years for false allegations. I thought, 18 years for false allegations? And then obviously the stuff came in. But,
and if you look at Sabine McNeil, look
she's on my list to ask you as well about, what's your opinion on that one?
9 years. I mean, she's a woman in her 70s. Why? Again, and the other one, brave one who spoke out against an MP, is Esther Baker. And the MP is then looking at suing her. Now, this MP, the stuff I will tell you one-to-one, but I'm not going to do it publicly because it's going to put...
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
But what I will say in respect to these MPs, we've got 634 MPs, right? Now, we're not pointing the finger at MPs and saying you're all perverts and all child abusers, but we are doing it for a handful of them. We've heard all the time about Jana. Constantly, his name crops up when I spoke to victims of him, and I have. Leon Britton, my God, the amount of times he was mentioned in the police when I was in there. I've got good, credible police witnesses that have gone on about that man. So his family have got the effrontery to even sue for the fact that appalling, right? Ted Heath, I mean, again, the brave copper that took him on, Mike Veal, they've destroyed that man. They've gone out their way to destroy him, the Chief Constable of Wiltshire, you know. And and again, Harvey Proctor, again, a man who's got convictions, and there is one other, but it never really got out. But anyway, so we hear the same ones time and time again. Now, coming back to what we said earlier about vetting, but why weren't they sacked? If I was a problem, and it happened in the police, there were a couple of men, you couldn't put them on, make them family liaison officers, for instance, and you couldn't make them on the domestic violence unit because they were players, you know, and they were like dogs with two dicks. You had to keep them away from women, you know.
Yeah, we've seen all the convictions. You know what I mean? People getting caught left, right, and centre, taking advantage of their positions and all the rest of it.
And it's gone on, and it will always go on. It's a lad's job, and it's full of ego, and you know they can't help themselves. But again, and sometimes the women, it's a bit of a kudos if they've had a copper and things like that. So it goes both ways, you know. But when you've got people like Leon Britton, you knew what he was up to. They knew what Mountbatten was doing, yet they continued to deny it until the CIA released the files the other day saying, you know, we knew he was a pervert. God bless the Americans for doing that, because our people haven't got the balls to do it, although they knew it. You know, Leon Britton, why allow these people into these high-level positions where they are going to be compromised, where they are open to bribery? Why allow it other than the fact that they did it on purpose? You know, they knew what they were doing, so that's why they wanted them. They don't want a sterling, upright, decent individual, you know, who cannot be conned, who cannot be swayed. They couldn't have someone like Wilfred Wong on there because you can't bribe the man with anything.
Yeah.
You know, proper old school Jackie Chan he is. But and he's like real life Jackie Chan. He's ex-forces and all sorts. But you know, they won't have people like that. They have to have scummy, pervy, horrible snakes like Leon Britton and Jana and all the others, because they want them in there so they can bribe them.
They're compromised, aren't they?
They're compromised, you know, they're bought and they're paid for. And that's that. And you know what? If that is the game, if that is their modus operandi, you know what? Shame on this system. And it needs to change. Our whole system, it just needs to collapse. And, you know, what I say to people, take an example from the Belgians. Saw what they did with Marc Dutroux. 1 minute, I'll come back online in a minute. See what they did with Marc Dutroux, you know? When I've probably only got about 5 minutes left for you, James, because it's
all right, brother, no worries.
But you know, look at that case, Dutroux.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I'll put links in the description box for people.
Because that man was caught out and exposed members of the Belgian royal family, the judiciary, and high up, right? And it wasn't just having sex with kids; they were killing them, they were torturing them. There was gangsters involved, exactly the same as what's been happening in the UK, but they exposed it there. And near enough, a fifth of the population took to the streets and caused the whole meltdown in Brussels. Well, that's what we need. We need to start doing this. So I'm not advocating violence at all.
No, you can't, and it's not going to work. So there needs to be cohesion and unity. That's what we're trying to do.
But we've got a starter here with Prince Andrew. We should not be dropping the ball with that one.
Well, Shaun's doing his work on that front, and I'm going to be looking at speaking to people of this targeted individual stuff, and we can probably follow on with this. So we chat again, John, because I'm sure we'll have an ongoing narrative.
You know, I'm going to tell you about that, targeting individuals, because they do target them, and they do. And they go out of their way, and I know because I've seen it happen. And I was instructed to go and pick a guy up once, and I knew who he was. He was an activist, and I told him, I said, they're out for you, mate. They're out for you. And it was coming from very, very high up, you know, and, you know, they did. They went out their way to destroy him, and they do it. They do that. But there is a lot of paranoia. There's a lot of people ring me up and say, MI6 are after me. And I said, well, do you know who MI6 are?
That's it, I know.
They haven't got a clue. But if they want you, they will have you. And
this is it about the targeted stuff, you know. Supposedly, since 9/11, security services have had their budget doubled and their headcount tripled. you know, people think of MI5 and MI6 of your, you know, your upper class James Bond type character. They've got an army of people working from them. God knows what they're all up to and what they're doing. But from what I'm seeing, there's a lot of different stuff going on, and a lot of people's testimonies that I'm seeing are all matching up. So there's either group hysteria or there's something to it, you know.
I get, you know, I get accused like many others that are in this world. You're MI5, MI6, and I can't be doing it. Can't be bothered with it. I mean, there must be more people working for MI5 than there are working for Tesco's and Pepsi Cola put together. It's nonsense. But what I will say on that front, covert policing, having been involved in the covert policing and known a lot of what they call the level 1 infiltrating officers. Some of them are superb and they're top of their game. And the course, the covert course, the infiltration course, was actually managed by the SAS, and it was part of their evasion and their interrogation thing. They took that model and they sold it to I think the Metropolitan Police were the first one to do it. And part of the course, they used to get an officer to say, well, meet us at this address, and he'd be abducted from the street, thrown in a van and interrogated. And it was a real, and they used to keep them awake for nearly 2 weeks without sleeping and to see if they could break them. And these guys, there's a good book written by a good friend of mine called Christian Plowman, an ex-detective I work with, and it's called Crossing the Line. And he was an infiltrator. And if you saw him in the street, you'd have no idea. You would have no idea. He's covered in tattoos. He used to
I've seen him.
Oh, you know, unbelievable. People refused to accept he was a covert copper. So when people go, oh, I can sniff out a copper anyway. No, you can't. But I'll tell you the golden rule here with that. They can't use children. So a lot of the gangsters, what they do is if someone turned up on the scene, they'd say, well, bring your kids along. We'll all have a meal. Bring your kids. Let's meet your family. And of course, if they didn't have kids, they weren't trusting them. They weren't allowing it. You know?
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that was, I think that's one of the ones they couldn't get. I think Curtis Warren for a long time. You know, the Liverpudlian, because he was really wise to it. So bring your kids. Let's meet with your kids and things.
Yes, this is it, and they got to play them at their own game. So I know you said your battery was running low there, John. So how are you looking?
Yeah, I don't know. I've probably got a couple of minutes left, and then it'll probably go boom. But I'm all right.
Fair play. What would be nice if we could? I was going to ask you about Sabine McNeil. I know you've mentioned him, but can you just give us a little bit more of a commentary from your side of the fence, or from your perspective of how that case came about and what you saw and what you know?
The funny thing is, I was contacted at the very beginning of it by Brian Gerrish and said, look, you need to watch this video anyway and give me your opinion. And I watched it, and having been someone who's interviewed children for many years, there's a thing called a free-flowing narrative.
Yes.
Kids are in the zone and they speak, it just comes out. Boom, boom, boom. And kids are pretty much open books. And I think it was a young boy when he was talking. I think it was just free-flowing. It was just, oh, that kid's not lying. No. That kid. So what I did was I then got in touch with my detective inspector, top guy, and said, have a look at this. So he looked at it, and then he said, right, I'm going to deal with this. So he then took it to the head of the Child Abuse Command. He did it straight away within an hour. He went mad, and he was told, back down, back down. And when I looked at, I had access to quite a bit of the paperwork for that, and I looked at the crime report. It's called a CRIS report, crime reporting system, right? When you manage a crime, it's difficult to get rid of them. They stay on the system for ages, you know, if you want to just write them off. It's probably a bit easier now, but back then it was quite hard going. So even if you had a theft, it could be on the system for 3 months before it's fully gone away. That crime, I think from being reported to being got rid of, was something like 6 weeks. And bear in mind, you were talking allegations of murder and torture. That's just unbelievable. It just didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I've always said about this, I believe the children, I don't believe the parents. And that's what I've said. I'm totally on board. I don't know. I keep getting the thing, there's a failure to protect with the parents here. And I know one was involved, but again, you know, It's the lioness.
Been used to muddy the waters, from what I can see, John. The fact that there might be some involvement on the other side. There's so much of muddying of the waters. But I've seen all the videos. I've seen all the interview videos. I've seen the analysis of the interview videos. You're not going to convince me that that's a hoax. I'm afraid not. Sorry.
I'm telling you the truth, in my opinion.
Yeah. I defy anyone to watch those videos, and you know they're not very pleasant to listen to. But if you're ready for that kind of information, then you can't watch that and think they're lying, can you? You know, it's just not. It's just not.
Well, again, it's what's called the free-flowing narrative. Yeah. They just go into it. They free flow, and it is. You can see it's experimental. Remember, it's just coming straight out of the head, straight into their head. It's not filtering. You know, they're not stopping to pause to remember if they've been briefed, and they've been briefed right. And if they have been briefed, they'll be looking at. I mean, the problem you had evidentially is whoever did that video, the initial one, not the police one, there's rules of giving evidence, right? And they've totally breached the rules. So therefore, evidentially, I can see why the police couldn't use it.
Right.
Because there's only 4 questions you must ask a child when you interview them. Tell me, explain, describe, and show. Anything like that evidence will be thrown out.
It's considered as leading, and I guess, is it?
Because it's leading, it's coaching, and it's all sorts of things. And there's things like encourages. You know, you've got to sit on your hands when you interview a kid, because you can do this, and you can encourage a kid. And if they see you smile, they know that they're doing something to please you, so they'll keep saying that thing, you see.
Right.
So why the interviewer is video when it's the person being interviewed. You know, so it's all that. So I can see why the police couldn't use the evidence. Not that they would anyway, because they didn't want to. But yeah. And
what was Sabine's position in all that, John? What was Sabine's? You know, how was her involvement?
Well,
it was a 9-year sentence for what was it?
I mean, I think they've accused her of perverting justice, don't they? That she's leaked something she shouldn't have leaked, and so there's a divided camp. But again, it's got very spiteful, that world as well. You know, her sentence was just horrific. I mean,
9 years.
She didn't deserve that. She didn't. Well, she didn't even deserve that. So
our connection's cutting off quite bad there, I think, John. I'm not sure it's because your battery's low.
Yeah. So but look, I'm always about. You got my details.
Yeah,
Get
of course.
In touch. I can get you. You know, send me a message who you want to talk to.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I'll try and as much as I can.
You're a gentleman. I appreciate that. Thank you, John. And thank you for taking the time this evening. You know, follow up on Shaun's interview because I had a few questions. And as you said, it'd be nice to have an ongoing narrative and just keep up to date with what's going on the ground level.
Yeah, we'll do. It's changing all the time, you know.
That's it. Every day's a school day.
God bless you.
Take care, John. Thanks for your time, brother. All the best. Ta-ra, buddy.